I never thought I'd have to defend my best friend in a courtroom of lawn rules. Buddy's a 14-year-old golden retriever with cloudy eyes and a gentler heart than most people I know. He barks twice when the mail comes, soft like he's clearing his throat. A gentle rumble from a soul who wouldn't hurt a fly. But last week, a crisp white letter arrived, and the HOA told me those two little woofs were a community disturbance. And if I didn't fix it, they'd take action against us both. They didn't just threaten my peace. They came for my family. Buddy came into my life when I was in college, a chaotic ball of golden fluff tumbling over his own paws. He was all eager eyes and a wagging tail that thumped against everything with the force of a happy little metronome. I picked him out of the litter because he was the one who clumsily climbed into my lap, gave my chin a slobbery puppy kiss, and promptly fell asleep. In that moment, he wasn't just a dog. He was my dog. 14 years later, that clumsy pup is old and slow. He spends most of his day curled up on the porch, a sunbeam his favorite blanket. His once vibrant coat is now frosted with white, especially around his sweet gray muzzle. His hips ache. On cold mornings, his eyesight is fading into a milky blue, and sometimes I have to gently place a hand under his haunches to help him up the 2 steps into the house. But he's still my shadow, following me from room to room, his tail giving a soft, thumping rhythm to my day. He's still my family. We live in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood where perfectly manicured lawns meet identical mailboxes. For years, nothing ever seemed out of place. It was the picture of suburban tranquility. For years, my life was beautifully, wonderfully simple. I'd work, I'd come home, and Buddy was always waiting at the door, his tail wagging a joyful tempo that could erase any bad day. It didn't matter how tired I was, that greeting was a constant. The neighbors knew him by name. Kids would slow their bikes to wave at him when we went on our slow, meandering walks, and Buddy, even with his stiff joints, would manage a weary but happy wag back. He was a part of the neighborhood's fabric. Nobody ever complained, not once, not a single word. That's why the first HOA letter hit like a thunderclap on a clear day. It was so out of the blue, so utterly disconnected from reality, that I actually laughed. I thought it was a mistake, a misaddressed envelope, a computer error. Out of nowhere, this sterile, formal document decided my aging napping dog was disturbing the community. The language was so cold, so impersonal. It referred to Buddy as the animal and his barks as the violation. It felt like they were talking about a broken appliance, not a living being. But then, a pattern emerged. Every time Buddy would let out one of his 2 soft woofs at the mail truck or a single surprised bark at a daring squirrel getting too close to his porch, I noticed it. A flicker of movement. The blinds in the house, directly across the street, would twitch, just slightly. It was the home of a woman who had never once waved back at me, who seemed to regard any sign of life, a child's laughter, a barking dog, a lawn not mowed by 10 a.m. on a Saturday, as a personal affront. Suddenly, the HOA's complaints, which claimed to be from the community, sounded a lot like her words. It wasn't the community that had a problem. It was one bitter neighbor pulling the strings, using the HOA as her personal weapon. The letters began to escalate. They became a dreaded ritual. The first one called Buddy a disturbance. The second one threatened a fine, $100, escalating for each subsequent violation. By the third, they were using the word removal. Removal. The word sat on the page, ugly and final, as if Buddy were a broken fence post to be pulled up or a pile of trash to be hauled to the curb. Each envelope, with its official logo and laser-printed address, felt colder, more clinical than the last. They were systematically stripping away the fact that this was about a living, breathing, aging soul who asked for nothing more than a sunny spot to rest and a kind word. I felt a cold knot of fear tighten in my stomach. This wasn't just about a fine anymore. This was a direct threat to a member of my family. The anxiety became a constant hum in the background of my life. I found myself shushing Buddy instinctively, my heart leaping into my throat every time he perked his ears up. I was living in a state of heightened alert in my own home, on my own porch. The peace they claimed to protect had been the first thing they destroyed. I knew I couldn't fight this alone with panic. I had to fight it with facts and with people. So, I took a deep breath, pushed my pride aside, and started talking to my neighbors. I went door to door, letter in hand, my voice shaking a little. As I explained the situation, the response was not what I expected. It was a balm to my raw nerves. One by one, they came forward. Mrs. Gable from 3 doors down, who always saved a leftover piece of unseasoned chicken for Buddy, was horrified. "Buddy doesn't bother us," she said, her voice firm. "He's the sweetest dog on the block." The young couple with the new baby, whom Buddy would watch with gentle curiosity, signed without hesitation. The teenagers who sometimes threw a ball for him in the park were outraged on his behalf. Soon I wasn't holding a petition. I was holding a testament. Dozens of signatures, names of people who knew Buddy, who loved him, who represented the real community. The HOA claimed they represented the community. But now, the community itself was standing against them, and they were holding the pen. I submitted the petition, a thick stack of paper that felt like a shield. And then, something fascinating happened. The board, once a monolithic, intimidating entity, started to show cracks. Whispers got back to me. Some members, it turned out, were appalled. They argued the complaints were nonsense, a waste of time, and an embarrassment. Others, undoubtedly influenced by my bitter neighbor, dug their heels in, demanding strict, unyielding enforcement. Suddenly, the HOA wasn't a united front anymore. The cracks were showing, and a little light was beginning to shine through. It was almost as if they had underestimated the power of the people they thought they controlled. But the letters didn't stop. The faction in power was doubling down, the fines were still threatened, and the word removal still hung over our heads like a blade. I had community support, but I needed a silver bullet. I needed irrefutable proof. That proof came from an unlikely angel, Mr. Henderson, a retired lawyer who lived 2 streets over and had signed the petition with a furious flourish. He called me one evening. "Bring over your HOA covenants and bylaws," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Let's see what this so-called board has forgotten." We spent the evening at his kitchen table, the dense legal documents spread out between us. He read with the patience of a man who had spent a lifetime untangling knots of legalese. And then he found it. His finger, slightly gnarled with age, tapped a paragraph buried on page 38. There it was, in black and white, a clause I had never known existed. Pets acquired by homeowners over a certain number of years ago were automatically granted grandfathered protection from new nuisance complaints. They were considered part of the established character of the home. Buddy, at 14 years old, having lived here for over a decade, was untouchable. The HOA had been bluffing all along. Their entire case, their threats, their intimidation, it was a house of cards. I felt a surge of emotion so powerful it left me dizzy, a mix of relief, vindication, and sheer, unadulterated fury. All this stress, all these sleepless nights, all this fear for my old friend, and they didn't even have a legal leg to stand on. It was a monstrous abuse of power. I had everything I needed: the law, the community, and the truth. The next HOA meeting was in 2 days. I prepared like I was going to war for the most important client of my life, because I was. The night of the meeting, I dressed carefully. I wanted to look respectful, formidable, and unshakable. I gathered my documents, the highlighted bylaws, the petition with its dozens of signatures, copies of the threatening letters. Buddy stayed on the porch, watching me with his cloudy eyes, his tail wagging slowly against the wooden planks, as if he knew I was about to go fight for him. I kissed his head. It's okay, boy. I've got this. The community room was starkly lit, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and anticipation. Folding chairs were lined in rows, and at the front, a long table sat the HOA board. My bitter neighbor wasn't on the board, but her closest ally, a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Greeley, was there, her lips pressed into a thin line. I took a seat, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. When my name was called during the open forum, I stood up. My knees felt weak, but my voice was steady. I held up the stack of papers. "My name is," I said, "and I'm here to speak about the complaints against my dog Buddy." I held up their letters. "You've threatened me with fines. You've threatened me with the removal of my dog, a member of my family who has lived here peacefully for 14 years. I could feel the eyes of the board and of my neighbors in attendance on me. Mrs. Greeley tried to interrupt, her voice dismissive. "The rules are clear regarding disturbances." I didn't let her finish. "What's even clearer," I said, my voice gaining strength, "is your own rule book." I held up the highlighted bylaws. I walked forward and placed them on the table before her. Specifically, Section 7C, which grants grandfather protection to pets of long-term residents. My dog is protected under your own covenants. Your threats are not only cruel, but they are also legally baseless. The room was utterly silent. The only sound was the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead and the rustle of the paper as Mrs. Greeley slowly pulled the document toward her. Her face, once stern and assured, drained of color. She scanned the page, her eyes darting back and forth. She had no response. No argument could counter the law. I wasn't done. I held up the petition. "And while your complaints came from a single unhappy individual, this is the voice of the actual community, the people you claim to represent, and they support Buddy." I glanced at Mrs. Greeley. Her eyes were fixed on the table, unable to meet mine or the gaze of the other. Board members, some of whom were looking at her with clear disappointment and anger. She never made eye contact with me again. The chairman of the board, a man I'd rarely seen speak, cleared his throat. "The board will need to review this matter further. Thank you for bringing it to our attention." It was over. The fight was won. When I walked out of that room, the relief was a physical wave, so intense it made my hands shake. But it wasn't just my relief. Neighbors who had come to support me clapped me on the shoulder, smiled, and thanked me. We had stood up together, and Buddy was waiting at the gate, his head cocked, his tail wagging that slow, happy thump against the pickets. He looked up at me with those old, trusting eyes, and I knew. I knew the fear was finally gone. The fight was over, but the lesson remained, etched into my heart. Love and loyalty cannot be silenced by petty rules. Buddy lived out his remaining years in perfect peace, a beloved fixture on his sunny porch. No more letters slid through the mail slot. No more threats hung over our heads. The HOA never dared bring up his name again. The quiet returned, but it was a different kind of quiet. A peaceful one, earned and respected. And slowly, the story of an old golden retriever and the battle we fought became a quiet symbol in the neighborhood. It was a story passed over fences and in Facebook groups. "Do it for Buddy," people would comment when someone posted about their own unfair HOA fine. Buddy had become more than a dog. He was a shorthand for courage, a reminder that sometimes the smallest voices, the softest barks, deserve the loudest protection. I often think about those nights I lay awake, my stomach churning with fear, listening to Buddy's soft snores from his bed beside me. I realize now the fear wasn't for me, it was for him. For the promise I made to that ball of fluff 14, years ago, to keep him safe and happy. He had given me years of companionship, loyalty, and a love so unconditional it felt like a force of nature. And when it came time to fight, I owed it to him to do everything I could. That experience taught me a profound lesson. HOAs can send letters on expensive letterhead. They can impose fines and hide behind rules. They can try to intimidate and bully, but they cannot control love. They cannot erase years of loyalty. They cannot legislate the bond between a human and their best friend. That bond is stronger than any bylaw, any fine, any bitter neighbor. And that's exactly what Buddy taught me. Sometimes the quietest battles have the deepest, most resonant victories. So to anyone watching this, treasure your pets. Love them fiercely. Stand up for them. Don't let bureaucratic rules or the petty complaints of unhappy people define what family means. Because in the end, when you find the courage to protect the ones you love, you don't just win your own battle. You inspire everyone else around you to find their courage too. You become a reminder of what's truly worth fighting for. And if you've ever had to stand up against an unfair rule, HOA or otherwise, or know someone who has, I want you to share your story in the comments below. Tell me about your buddy. I read every single one, and I know this incredible community will be here to support you. If you believe in these stories of loyalty, love, and courage, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and help make sure these voices continue to be heard. Buddy's story might be over, but the lessons he taught me about love, about courage, about community, will echo in my heart, and I hope in yours, forever.